When asked about his identity, John the Baptist denied being Elijah the prophet. We read about this in the book of John, chapter 1. However, Jesus himself once told his disciples, John is Elijah. Why then did John's response contradict Jesus' claim? Is this a contradiction in the Bible? John's response has created three groups of people. One group of people believe that John is Elijah. The second group of people believe that John is not Elijah and is going to come back at the end of days. And the third group of people believe this to be a contradiction in the Bible. To be able to understand what John actually meant, we must go all the way back to the book of Exodus. From chapter 25 through to 30, we read about God giving Israelites instructions about how to set up a tabernacle, about its layout, its measurements, and about making various instruments for worship. One might argue, saying that John has got nothing to do with the tabernacle, but trust me, it will blow your mind when you know how they are related and how God plans everything so intricately. In my opinion, he is the best twist and story writer. Let's get back to our tabernacle. The tabernacle was a portable dwelling place of God which was used by the Israelites from the time of Moses until the construction of the Temple of Solomon. The tabernacle consists of a tent and an outer courtyard. We will discuss about the tent, the two sections of the tent, and the articles of worship used inside the tent in part 2 of the series. We'll focus on the outer courtyard for now. It had a basin close to the entrance of the tent, which was used by the priest to cleanse themselves before they entered the tent. Nobody else was allowed to use this basin. In fact, nobody else was allowed to enter the courtyard. It also had an altar which was used by the priests to offer sacrifices to God. The tabernacle was east-oriented. The entrance of the courtyard and that of the tent faced eastward. The priest would enter the courtyard, offer sacrifices, clean themselves, enter the tent, and worship facing west. As mentioned earlier in the video, tabernacle was a place of worship only until the Temple of Solomon was constructed. During Solomon's time, Israel was a rich nation. So he ordered construction of a temple. The temple was similar in design, only that it was larger in size and the articles of worship used in the temple were more in number. It was also east-oriented like the tabernacle. There was one more place that had the same east orientation as the tabernacle and the temple. Moreover, there was God's presence in that place just like it was in the two places of worship. We read that he literally came down from heaven and walked in it. And it is the Garden of Eden. In the book of Genesis chapter 3, we read that God kicked Adam and Eve out of the Garden of Eden and stationed a cherubim east of it, guarding the path to the tree of life. If the cherubim was stationed east of Eden to guard the path to the tree of life, then the entrance of garden must have faced east. Is the similarity between the three just a coincidence? Or could it be possible that the tabernacle and the temple were modeled after the Garden of Eden to restore the relationship God had with man? After all, God does not change. If the answer is yes, then there must be other similarities. And how do these two articles of worship make any sense? Why were they placed in the temple and the tabernacle in the first place? Why the sacrifice? Why the cleansing? Do they symbolize something that was in the Garden of Eden? Let's find out. In the book of Genesis, chapter 3, verses 7, we read, Then the eyes of both were opened, and they knew that they were naked. Well, this happened after they disobeyed God by eating the forbidden fruit. And they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loincloths. Why did they feel the need to cover themselves? It was because of the sin. Few verses later, in verse 21, we read, God made leather clothing for Adam and his wife and clothed them. Well, it does not take a genius to know that garments made of leaves are not durable. They are going to dry and wither in the heat of the sun. So God had to step in and make leather clothing for them. Notice he makes leather clothing for them. But I believe that the leather came from an animal, which means that God had to kill an animal to cover their nakedness. An animal died because they had sinned. So sacrifice and sin are connected. If there is no sin, there is no sacrifice. By stepping in and solving their problem, God is kind of like sending a message right at the beginning of humanity, saying you cannot fix your problem. Even if you try and fix, it's not going to be permanent, it's going to be temporary. And the work of men cannot give them salvation. It is through God that we have salvation. So this altar of burnt offering symbolizes the first sacrifice that was made in the Garden of Eden. People call God cruel being for demanding sacrifice, but now we know it was not God that demanded sacrifice first. It was the action of man. God could not just magically undo what they had done. The only solution there was sacrifice. Whatever God does is established, it continues on. Hence, the people of Israelites were asked to offer sacrifices to him. Because just like our forefathers, just like Adam and Eve, we are not without sin. I believe a cleansing process might have taken place after the sacrifice, because God would not give bloody garments to Adam and Eve. So the basin in the temple and the tabernacle symbolizes a cleansing process that took place in the Garden of Eden. In verse 23 we read, "So God expelled them from the Garden of Eden and sent them to work the ground, the same dirt out of which they had been made." What that means is all these incidents took place within the boundaries of Eden. So this is the sequence of the events: sacrifice, cleansing, and expulsion. Hence, these articles were placed perfectly in the tabernacle and the temple, right next to the entrance. We read that it is in the tent when it comes to tabernacle, and the temple, the actual temple, when it comes to the temple of Solomon, where God resides. God wants us to return to him the same way we were expelled from the Garden of Eden. See you on part 2. Thanks for watching.